So today we are in Parashah, and I love these new Parashah names. It's quite interesting to me, right? Because we've never done this before, right? These are the names of the Sidrot. So the ancient Israeli 3.5-year Torah cycle, which is almost lost. You have no idea, guys, how hard it is if you go out and Google for hours to find these readings, right? To find out what they are. So when we started, I was just looking in the Masorah, finding where the markers were for the readings and doing it that way. So it's really something to me. That's something so amazing and so well documented in the actual Bible itself as these readings. It's kind of like lost knowledge today. So this says, Vayizkor Elohim et Noach. So then God remembered Noach, right? Or just then God remembered, I don't know why Noach isn't showing up there. Okay, whatever. Should say Noach. There he is, okay. Interesting. And if you didn't do the reading was very short this week, which concerned me. I was thinking, oh no, I hope it's not a double parashah, because that's not really marked because sometimes you have double, sometimes you don't, right? Depending on how long that particular 3.5-year cycle goes. So, who knows? Who knows? It's, but here's what I figure. I bought a book on this, and the book should be here from Balak Bayan Services probably by January. And so we won't be that far behind. So if it turns out there was a double parashah, we've got a few years to catch up, right? So we can make that happen. Okay, so the reading, it's just 14 verses. It's Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 8, verse 1 to verse 14. And the Haftarah, these we're not sure of where they end, because again, I don't have the book, and it's not marked in the Masorah where it ends. It's only marked where it begins, right? So we know and actually it's not always marked where it begins in the Haftarah. So some of this I found from a book that I bought, which again, she'll be on the way. I had a friend take a picture of a few pages, so at least we're set for several months on where they begin. So the Haftarah starts with the prophet Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 2. Okay, and this is a poetic reading. It's like a psalm almost, but it makes mention, or reference rather, to the deluge, to the Mabul. Okay. So let's get started with a prayer now, since we're in our official content. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Ta'azer na'oti hayom hazeh, ki ani yachol ledaber rak ki ata rotzei, Adonai. Ani lo rotzei lilmod rak ki chashavti ki tov, ve'ani rotzei la'asot et hakol asher tov ba'einecha. Tishlach na Adonai aleinu et ruchacha al hal amecha Adonai. Toda lecha b'schut Yeshua HaMashiach. Okay, so here we have the Masorah for today's parasha. So you can see here we've got the marker, that big old samech with the with the sideways comets on top of it. And it's only marking the line. It doesn't say it's right here. So if you look, this is the end of last week's parasha, and then here we go. There it is. Vayizkor. You see it? This is how our parasha starts today. Vayizkor Elohim et Noach. Ve'et kol chayah ve'et kol bahema asher ito lateva. Right, so just like to show you this 1,000-year-old manuscript. It's actually over 1,000 years old. All right. And here we start with Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. Here's our chapter up there in case you get confused about where we are. Remember, please feel free to interact and ask questions, comment in the chat as you like. So it says, Vayizkor Elohim et Noach, ve'et kol chayah ve'et kol bahema asher ito bateva. We usually like to stop there with our etnachta, semicolon marker. So it says, then Elohim remembered Noach. So let's just chop this up a bit and examine. Vayizkor. So according to the Jewish scholar Sarna, in the Jewish Publication Society commentary on Genesis, rather on one of their commentaries on Genesis, he comments that remembering, this is from Zakhar, particularly on the part of God, is not the retention or recollection of a mental image, but a focusing upon the object of memory that results in action. So when we see this verb used throughout the Tanakh, this is how, when it's in reference to Hashem, this is how it's intended to be understood. It's not like God forgot, and then, oh, and now he remembers, I gotta save Noach, right? It's showing us that he is intent to act. He's launching a plan, right? This is kind of the full scope of the meaning of this word when it relates to God. And then, according to the Masorah, the phrase God remembered, so Vayizkor Elohim in Hebrew, only occurs in 3 other places. Genesis chapter 19, verse 29, chapter 30, verse 22, and then once in Exodus chapter 2, verse 24. And that's referencing my own book. Okay, so God remembered Noach. So let's look at the full phrase there. He remembered Noach. So this was very interesting. I was looking in, not this one. Okay, this I just got from my book again. In the past, I looked in the Targum about this, but later we have another interesting thing from another Targum. So look what the Targum Yonatan has to say about this. It says, Uvechil Adonai the meymrah yat Noach. Noach. Trying to get that Aramaic right for Yehoshua. So this says that then, by his memra, by his word, Hashem remembered Noach. This is very interesting, and you'll see how this comes into play later in our discussion. The connection between our biblical flood story and the hero Noach, the prophet / hero, whatever we want to call him, the tzaddik from that generation, as an archetype of the future hero, the Messiah. And it's very interesting to me that the writer of Targum Yonatan in the Aramaic had this insight, this spiritual insight, to say that by means of the Messiah, God intended to act. Remember? Zakhar, Hebrew zakhar, when used with Elohim, it implies that the object of memory is going to result in action. He's going to do something. He's not just seeing mental images. He's not just thinking about, Noah's a good guy. It's not one of these things. He's going to act. And so the Targum elucidates that by means of, this is probably an accusative of means, we would call it, by means of his, this is his, here at the end, I thought about colorizing that one too, but I didn't want to get too confusing. His meymrah, his word. And as we've seen before, Memra, or dibura sometimes, in the Jewish Aramaic Targums, this is an animate, living, walking, speaking anthropomorphization of God's Torah, of his word, which of course maps beautifully to the Masorah Yochanan and the whole teaching that his word became flesh. So here, his word was the means by which he intended to take action with regards to Noach. So the floods already happened at this stage, right? Noach and his crew, which is every living animal, and his family, the last surviving humans on earth, and if you believe the Midrash, the giant Og clinging to the outside, holding onto the ark, right? Okay? So he decides to act by means of his word. Continuing on. Wow, I can't believe that didn't provoke any questions. Va'et kol hachayah, va'et kol habehema. And every animal all of the animal, literally it says, all of the animal, and all of the beasts. So this first one, chayah, Hebrew, chayah, this is like a wild animal usually. And again, these Hebrew words, they have the 3,000 meter in the sky meaning, and then they've got in context with other words. So if you just say chayah by itself, the chet, yod, hey here, let me colorize that. If you just say it by itself, then this could be inclusive of all animals, right? Like every animal. Oh, cool, I'm using my glove and it is working. Huh, but I can't color. Why isn't it? There we go. Okay. Chayah, Hebrew chayah. So that really just means animal, if it were by itself. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard the saying that in biblical hermeneutics, context is king. And that is so true in Hebrew. With Hebrew, these words, they have different nuanced meanings, depending on if they're by themselves or if there are other words from the same genre of words in close proximity to them, right? Or in parallel to them. We've discussed before Hebrew parallelism. So in this case, we do have another word, bahema. All right? So bahema, it's like a beast, right? I've read some commentary some years back that actually, it was a lexicon, that discussed the idea that this is from hum, like the ability to make noise, and that they could not make hum, so these are beasts that cannot speak. And speaking is different for animals, so if a bird would not be included, right? A bird sings, this would be like cattle and livestock and that kind of thing. And so, since this word is going to mean something like livestock, right? Then in context, the other one will mean wild animals. So chayah are the wild animals from nature, right? The foxes, the lions, the dolphins, although I guess you don't need dolphins in the ark, but etc. These sorts of things. And then the behemah, this is the domesticated animals. Yahushua says the word animal comes from the word animate, living, moving, just like chayah comes from the word life, right? Like chayim. This is also why the bride of Adam Rishon, why Chawa, why she's called Chawa. The text tells us because she is the mother of the living, right? So like, of course, the inference is the human living, right? She's not the mother of the animals. Yeah, that's a nice analogy. Thank you for that, Yehoshua. All right. Asher ito bateva. Who were, we have to say to make it make sense in English here, and so were ito, with him, and the o at the end is him, and that is going to be your Hebrew letter for the week. For those of you who have not learned to read yet, the Hebrew letter for the week. So this will be the letter that sponsors the drash. It will be the letter Vav. And if you look at the very top, you can just do a straight line. We'll keep it simple. This is V. Today it's a V sound. We go with the Sephardic Israeli pronunciation for the most part in the Bible. V. Just a straight line. But here you can see there's a little bit of a curve to it in these words, right? So if you want to be like the font, stop it. Interesting. Even with the glove it did that. Well, maybe we go like here. You do like this, okay? And that makes a V sound. It used to be a W in ancient times. That's why you like to say Chawa instead of Chava. Even though Jews would usually call her Chava, it wasn't really her name. Her name was Chawa. This is very clear. There's no disputes when you hear other people out there saying, no, it's God's name is Yehovah. It's ridiculous. It's not possible. It's not. Okay? All right. Who were with him, right? In this case, we put a dot on top of it, and it makes an O sound. You don't have to know that yet. Ba teva, in the cube, not cube, but like box, the chest, the ark, in the ark. Vaya'avel Elohim, and God caused to cross over, ruach al haaretz, Vayashoku hamayim. And this is interesting. I have this word marked. Now, usually in translations, mine included, we say a wind, right? God sent a strong wind over the earth. And he restrained, and that's interesting, here we have plural form, and they restrained, and the waters were restrained. The waters were restrained. They were held back. Now there's some commentary by the sages that the reason for the winds, this was to stop any clouds from forming, right? So there'd be no cloud formation, so there would not be more rain. So in the time that Hashem restrained the ma'iniot, the deep wells that the water was coming up from, when he stopped that from happening anymore, and he also stopped water from coming down from above, for this next time period, he also stopped any kind of normal rain. This is what our tradition informs us of. There was no more normal rain that you would expect. So some say that this ruach was to stop clouds from forming, that was its purpose. It would break up all the clouds. It's interesting because it says al haaretz, over the earth, right? So it's a big wind. Now, what's interesting, and the reason I marked it, is because you can also... Okay, why did I put that one there? Oh, that's something from Targum. Okay, I'll share that in a second. Okay. The reason I marked this word down here is because ruach, Hebrew ruach, also means spirit, right? I think most of you know that. So you could translate this that God caused a spirit to cross over upon the earth. So it's like he designated someone to do this. Just like in the very first parasha, we mentioned that when it says ruach Elohim me'achefet al panei tzahom, or al panei hamayim, that when there was that the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, that could also be interpreted that a wind from God. Or, as Ibn Ezra says, a spirit sent by God, right? That there was another spirit involved, that it wasn't necessarily his ruach. No, we're not saying that. Just, it's possible to interpret this way. And many scholars, they have articles about Elohim being used as the superlative. So you could actually interpret that ruach Elohim could mean a powerful wind, a massive wind, right? Then where the Elohim causes to be the most of the thing, right? A wind from winds. A wind from gods would be like a powerful wind. So anyway, I just want you guys to start seeing that there's other options in translation that happen here. And so I did have something from another Targum I wanted to share. This is from Targum Yerushalmi, commenting on our verse in question here. And it says, Vayizkor Elohim tovo ve'if. Okay, so I should say, Vayizkor Elohim tovo ve'if aimeh yaf Noach wa'alvel Adonai rucho ve'rachamim. Trying to get Yehoshua's approval on that. So and it's the same thing, So, and he remembered. But what's interesting, it says by his mercies, the goodness that was with him, with Noach, or for Noach, and he caused to cross over. Adonai caused to cross over the spirit of mercies. So it's kind of interesting that we have this. By the way, Yoshua, you want to chime in if my translation's off? I don't mind being corrected on that. I think that's about right. According to mercies, probably here the right is like kaf. All right. So we have this attribute of mercy is what is activating Hashem, which is also very interesting. When we connect this attribute of mercy, and I'm going to highlight it here. I'm going to mark this for you. Actually, it's not highlight. Let's do drawing. Okay. So look here. By means of his mercy. And the other Targum is saying, by means of his word. And when you look at these two Targumim, the two translations we have here, it's quite interesting that we end up with his attribute of mercy was manifested in whom? More than anyone else. In his son, the Messiah, right? And who do we connect the word to be? Again, his son, the Messiah. So it's very interesting to me. I think some of these Aramaic translators, I think they really had ruach HaKodesh on them when they were doing their translations. We get so much interesting and useful information that confirms the apostolic writings as they elucidate and clarify the Hebrew text. Okay? Now regarding this, all the beasts, I had a note here I didn't put up. The Rambam comments, the remembrance concerning them was because he remembered his holy word. Oh, sorry for the font stuff. I didn't edit that. Psalms 105:42, the Rambam's referencing, which he had spoken, causing the world to come into existence. And the will which was done before him at the creation of the world arose before him, and he desired the existence of the world with all the species that he created therein. So he loves all of his creatures, all of the species. And it's interesting to me that the sage, the Rambam, he's focusing in on this. If we tie this in with the Targumims, it looks like the will that he's speaking of is actually the word, right? There's a parallel to the word. Rambam, he's familiar with the Targumim, right? He would have known them. And so it seems like this is why he's drawing out this interpretation. What was the will that was with him at the creation of the world? Who was there participating in the creation at the beginning? Who is the Alpha and Omega, etc.? Any questions or comments? All right. Oh yeah, this is just regarding ruach. I got my animations out of order.